Welcome back to the Word for the Valley podcast, where we've been following along with Pastor Mike through his in-depth studies through the book of Matthew. And in Matthew 19, we move from confrontation to invitation. While the religious leaders came to Jesus looking to test him, now parents come bringing their children hoping for blessing, prayer, and the touch of the Messiah. But surprisingly, the obstacle in this moment is not the crowd, the children, or even the parents, it's the disciples. They rebuke those who are trying to come to Jesus. And in this episode, Pastor Mike begins walking us through this section, helping us see how easily we can misunderstand the heart of God, and how important it is not to become a barrier to others coming to Christ. Let's follow along with Pastor Mike from chapter 19, verse 13.
You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at the preaching calendar, and I was realizing that we're going to be about in this chapter when it came to Easter Sunday. And so it was about the time I was beginning to contemplate whether or not we'll take a Sunday off from our regular verse-by-verse study in Matthew to do something kind of more Easter-centric, more Resurrection Sunday-oriented. And there is certainly nothing wrong with that, but as I was thinking and praying through it for myself, kind of the thing that came up to me during the entire kind of process of it, of praying through it and seeking kind of some answers on what to do, is we started Easter Sunday about 4 or 5 weeks ago. In the book of Matthew, the whole account of the resurrection, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, that started about 4 or 5 weeks ago, back in chapter 16. And we're going to be dealing with Easter topics, Easter themes, resurrection, kind of the whole, we're going to be dealing with that for the next 6 months. So I felt like the Lord said, you don't need to take one special day and focus on Easter. You're just going to do that for 6 months. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine with me. If that's how long you want us to take in contemplating these things, I'm fine with that too. But it is certainly Easter Sunday, and it is something that the Lord is building to here in his life in the account of Matthew as well. It starts, as I said, it starts back in chapter 16. The third and final movement, the third and final kind of section of the book of Matthew starts back in chapter 16 when Simon finally acknowledged to Jesus that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. When he said that, that started a whole new movement in the book of Matthew. It wasn't just signs and wonders anymore. It all had a direction. It all had a purpose. And ultimately, it was all leading to the cross. Because right on the heels of that, Jesus says to his disciples in verse 21 of chapter 16, from that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. Now we know Peter didn't really appreciate that, and that he came back to Jesus and tried to correct him and keep him from it, and then had to get scolded pretty heavily by Jesus for so doing, right? But the idea now, if I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, if this is who you say that I am, and you are right, that means then I must go to Jerusalem. I must be given over to the religious leaders. I must die. I must be buried for 3 days. I must rise again. Those things have to happen. Now the disciples don't understand that right away, so Jesus comes back in chapter 17, and says it again there in verses 22 and 23. That while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and the third day he'll be raised up. This time, the disciples, when they heard it, they didn't argue with Jesus. They just got really morose. They just got deeply saddened. It says that they were exceedingly sorrowful. Still not really walking in faith, still not really receiving it with the fullness of what Jesus wanted them to, with the idea of like, hey, he's going to be raised the third day. All they heard was the death part. He's going to die. He's going to be buried. The religious leaders are going to do this. These kinds of things. That's where they got fixated. But the whole point of it, Jesus said, hey, this is going to have to happen. This is the Messiah's work. They're going to kill him. They're going to bury him, speaking of himself. And then on the third day, he'll be raised up. And I told them that there. Now, last week we saw in chapter 19, as Jesus is moving to the cross, and his great theme to his disciples is really dealing with his death, burial, resurrection, which is the culmination of the work of the Messiah on earth. As he does that there are times where the religious leaders come along and pose different kinds of questions. And Matthew 19 will not be the last time we see this. But every time they do, they pose a question that is on a much lesser plane than the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Here in chapter 19, we saw last week, they wanted to talk about divorce, right? Jesus is talking to his disciples about dying, saving the world, reconciling mankind to a relationship with God. And they want to know, is it all right to get divorced for any reason? Kind of thing. And it's a distraction. It's a much lesser question. It's a question more fixated on man than it is on God. A question more fixated on sin than it is on salvation. A question more fixated on something broken rather than something fixed. And again, the religious leaders will do this to Jesus all the way to the end, continuing to ask him questions, but in all of their questions, they focus on lesser things. The beauty of Christ is that he answers their question, as we saw last week. He answered their question regarding marriage and divorce and his purposes and plans there that God had for them. But then he comes right back where his themes are salvation through the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah. He comes right back to that. And so interestingly enough, we actually see another kind of little scene here of this where Jesus is bringing them back to salvation. In Matthew, it's just 3 verses. This account is also given to us in Mark. There it's 4 verses, and in Luke, there it's 3 verses again. But it's just this little brief snapshot of this unique encounter here with the Messiah. And it says here in verse 13, then little children were brought to him, that he might put his hands on them and pray. The parents are seeking blessings for their children, but the disciples rebuked them. All right? So, whereas the religious leaders were looking to test and confront, the parents are coming looking to be blessed, looking to acknowledge the sovereignty and lordship of the Messiah and surrender to that for their own blessing and for their own benefit. Their attitude is much different. The interesting thing in this scene is that the problem is not necessarily with the parents. The problem is not with the children. Certainly the problem is never with Jesus. Right? The problem primarily here is with the disciples, where it says that they recognize these parents bringing these little children to Jesus, and it says that the disciples rebuked them. Now, there is a time, clearly, when Jesus and his disciples are called to rebuke things, wrong things, correct things, admonish things, right? Jesus would certainly rebuke Peter when he had the wrong conception of what the Messiah was going to be and do, right? Get thee behind me, Satan, he said to Peter, kind of thing. It's not as if Jesus is some big marshmallow that just lets everybody do whatever they want whenever they want to, kind of thing. But it is imperative when yielding that type of authority that you make sure that you rebuke the right things, that you stand in the right place. And by and large, the rebuke needs to be where Jesus is going to rebuke. What you don't want to do is you don't want to rebuke somebody that Jesus is actually inviting, right? He's inviting, he's drawing, and here the disciples they're rebuking, they're clearly working against Jesus in this case. Now, the context, I think, is significant in that back in the time of Christ, noted rabbis would have people do this to him on a regular basis. Not just Jesus, but other rabbis as well. That when a rabbi was recognized as significant, some form of authority, they taught well, that the people would come to them almost for the wrong reasons. They would come and they would seek some blessing of that rabbi, some acknowledgement of that rabbi. They would want to get that rabbi's positive affirmation, his approval in their lives. And in so doing, it would make the parents feel in some ways like that they were doing a better job, right? He could be poorly raising my kids this whole time, but I'm going to bring my children to the rabbi and he'll just put his hands on them, he'll say a prayer over them, and then the whole thing will be fixed. In some regard, it's not exactly correct in the context. The beautiful thing in this case is Jesus is the rabbi. So the acknowledgement here that the parents may not be fully kind of above board, acknowledging Christ with the fullness, may be the reason why the disciples rebuked them, right? The disciples could rebuke the parents for 2 reasons. One is that the task seemed beneath Christ, right? He doesn't have to just lay his hands on somebody and bless them. If you're going to get another rabbi to do it or Jesus to do it, then just go get another rabbi to do it. That task is way beneath him. It's kind of like in some ways, the undue expectation of the pastor being always the one to pray at the Thanksgiving meal. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. Maybe you are the lone Christian in your family. If that's the case, you might be the family pastor. So the meals, they look at you, hey, pastor, would you like to pray? That's the only time they'll ever call you pastor, by the way, Thanksgiving meal is when they want you to pray. And like, no, you're a Christian, you pray. Well, you get the same access to God that you do it kind of thing. And it may be that the undue expectation or the pressure here for Jesus to be something that's not genuinely sincere. It may be that the disciples are picking up on that to some degree. Now, that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay? It may be more likely that they're actually rebuking the parents because not the task being beneath Christ, but they see the people as being beneath Christ. These are just little kids. In Luke, it actually says that some of them are infants, right? So they're not even walkable to Jesus. They're carryable. They have to be brought there by somebody else. And as they approach Jesus, the disciples stand off and rebuke them. And I just think one of the things you need to understand in regards to your relationship with the Lord and seeking God and His reality is that there are always going to be, even at times, well-intentioned individuals. But there are always going to be individuals that for some reason or another stand between you and Jesus Christ. That is always the way it is. I am put off and aggravated to quite a degree at times where I'll hear people say, I would believe in Jesus, but all the Christians I know are hypocrites. Like there aren't hypocrites everywhere else in the world. Right? Whatever sports team you like, do you not think that some of those fans are also hypocrites? Do you not think that some of those people that are on your sports team themselves are hypocrites? They love the Eagles, right? They wear the Eagles. They got the Eagles helmet. And somebody comes across and gives them a better contract next year. Now all of a sudden they are no longer Eagles anymore. Do you like them anymore? They're not. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But are they not hypocrites to some degree? Sellouts for a bigger contract? Less devoted to the cause of winning football games for the Eagles or whatever your team is? Doesn't mean you don't like your team anymore or less. You still typically follow them and hope that they win. There are hypocrites everywhere. Just in some ways it gets heightened when it deals with spiritual things, godly things, Christian things, church things. But all of a sudden, because the standard for them is perfection, because the standard for these disciples, they can't ever do anything wrong. And if they do, then it's a reason for me not to have to do the right thing. To me, that's just an excuse. That's an excuse. You're not being honest with yourself. If hypocrites are enough to dissuade you from coming to Jesus Christ, then Satan will make sure that you know lots of hypocrites, and in the so doing, you actually probably will become one of them. You can't do that. You have to be honest enough with yourself. You have to be sincere enough with yourself. You have to look at yourself in the eye or whatever in the heart and say, what do I want? What direction am I going? There are a million people going in different directions. There are a million people speaking for God maybe in some ways, even wrongly. Does that have any bearing on what I do? Or am I going to press on? Am I going to seek Him anyway? Am I going to come to disciples who will probably scold me for so doing, but bringing my children to Jesus anyway and standing there until Jesus runs me off, even though these guys might be yelling at me the whole time? This is the scene. This is what these parents are doing. Now, remarkably, it says in verse 14 that when Jesus recognizes it, that Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." Now, a couple things. Let the little children come to me. It's the intention of the parents to bring the children to Jesus. So He's telling the disciples, just let it happen. Let the process continue. He doesn't say to the disciples, go out there and find little kids on the street, enticing them into your big van with candy and then getting sued and fined for all of the things that is wrong in doing kind of thing. Like, he didn't say go get little kids and bring them to me. Go hunt them down. If they're playing stickball in the street and they're happy doing it, let them alone kind of thing. It's fine. It's okay for the little kids to play in the streets. It's interesting. One of the descriptions of the millennial kingdom is that the kids will play in the streets. And Joe Focht oftentimes makes the acknowledgement that the Bible does not say that they will be praying in the streets. I think sometimes we expect children to be way more spiritual than they're capable of being. We want them to be whatever our picture of on fire for Jesus is and that kind of thing. And in so doing, we're actually asking them to be something that can't be sincere in little children. But we motivate it, we encourage it, we celebrate it when it happens, and somehow or another we think ourselves more spiritual when our kid is 10 and they want to read the Bible on their own, and somehow or another I got the parenting thing down, and everybody else who's got a wayward child in their teenage years, it's your fault, kind of thing in raising kids. And I usually just say, just wait, right? Little kids can have little kid devotions, right? And that's fine. It's great when it happens, right? But I would much rather have 22-year-old devotions out of a 22-year-old or 32-year-old devotions out of a 32-year-old than 10-year-old devotions out of a 10-year-old. Right? Just let it happen. Don't force it, the thing, right? Don't force it. Don't go make it happen. Don't go out there and recruit little kids in this. If they have the inclination, they're being drawn in this way. He's just telling the disciples, don't stand in their way. Don't oppose it. Just kind of let it happen. And I'm okay with this, right? Let the little children come to me. Do not forbid them. And then he says this, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. That the kingdom of heaven is actually made for people like little children, which is exactly what he had said back in chapter 18, remember. In verse 3 of chapter 18, he says, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Jesus actually told his own disciples earlier, if you don't become like a little child, you might not even get into heaven. This actually becomes a picture for them. This becomes a model, a picture, an idea, an image that he wants to put in front of them. Now again, not every kid is going to come and get blessed. Not every parent feels this need or obligation. And even the ones who are doing it might be doing it for the wrong reasons. But the picture is the same. And in so doing, as Jesus deals with these little children, what he's actually doing is he's actually making a statement for how he wants to deal with all of us. Now the problem for us is, do we want to be disciples or do we want to be little children? Because in this scene, the two of them are not the same. The disciples are not functioning according to the standards of little children. The disciples are functioning according to the standards of disciples. We're in charge. We're in authority. We have the freedom to rebuke people that we don't feel, that Jesus should spend his time with. So go away. Take your kids and go home. Whatever, these kinds of things. And they're doing something other than little children. Now, for a little child meeting other little children, they don't take the standard of superiority, dominion, authority. Little children, when they meet other little children, what do? They play. They play. They giggle. You wait around here after church for a little bit, and whatever kids are left, they run. I get it. They were in a little room back there for a while and they need to stretch their legs. But it's some form of tag and they're running around and the parents, it's okay. It's okay. I just don't want them to die in here, kind of thing. Like they're going to fall, cause you watch some of these little kids and they're just figuring out that running is a thing and their legs aren't quite ready for it yet. And I just don't want them running around and falling up against a table or a chair or something and blood and stuff. It's not a good way to end Easter service. Okay. That's not that. But otherwise, kids are going to be kids. Kids are going to play. And little children are going to recognize other little children. And once they kind of get over whatever strangeness they may have, right? They're going to be willing to play. They're going to be willing to engage. And again, one of the For me, I love kids. I love little kids. I especially love other people's little kids. Because then I don't ever have to be the bad guy. I can play, I can say nice things, I can even get them wound up, and send them home to their parents and smile doing it and having a great time having done it. It's like a surrogate grandfather in some ways. It's marvelous kind of thing, right? But the beauty of little kids is the pressure of being special is off. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be unique. Right? They're not evaluating you. What's wrong with this? And why does why does this eye go that direction? Why does that foot go that direction? Why can't you keep up? Why can't you do these? Little kids, infants, little kids, toddlers, they don't think along those lines. They usually think along the lines of, which kid has my toy? That's inevitably the story I get from children's ministry from Julie on a Sunday morning. How did it go today? Well, the fight was over the trains today. Or the fight was over usually it's snack. Somehow or another, snack becomes a war, for the little kids, right? And how they're going to take snack and whose snack they're going to take and these kinds of things, right? But even in that, there's an engagement, right? There's a childlikeness to it in some ways. The benefit of what the disciples could have done here, that they didn't do because they were coming at it with the wrong posture, is that they could have just got down on their knees and looked these little kids in the eyes, taken them in their arms, and just enjoyed the childlikeness of these children. Instead, because they weren't what the disciples wanted them to be, they begin to stand off and separate themselves from the children. And in that way, the ones who miss out in this scene are the disciples. They don't have the benefit of just playing, right? Just letting your hair down. One of the things that you learn eventually with the Lord is that you don't have to be special. You don't have to be unique. You don't have to be decidedly good, because there is none that does good. No, not one. You don't have to be something you're not. You don't have to try to put on airs. You don't have to try to make people think something of you. The beauty in this is that he has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the wise. He has chosen the foolish. He has chosen the ignoble. That these are the people that he's come to seek and to save. The challenge for us is being okay, being weak. Now listen, I don't like when I feel weak. Years ago, this always comes to my mind with this. I think it was Derrick Rose when he was back playing for the Chicago Bulls. I'm not a basketball fan, so forgive me if I got names and numbers wrong, because I don't really care. But the picture of what happened has stuck in my mind, right? And I think he tore his ACL for the second time. And in this basketball game, obviously he'd gone down, obviously an injury. And what sticks in my mind is, here's a grown man, fully grown, very grown, by the way, like 6+, grown, right? Great athlete. Just a tremendous, making, gobs and gobs of money, right? And it took 3 or 4 guys to carry him off the court. And just the despair, right? I mean, listen, I've hurt myself. You would have to knock me out to carry me off the court. What kind of disrespect is that to me as an athlete? To be carried off the court. You see these guys, they literally, you could see their leg is sticking out sideways. Air cast it, I want to hobble to the sideline. Kind of thing. They don't want to be carried. Because the ignobility, the degradation, the statement on the strength of the person to be carried makes the person who's being carried helpless and feeling quite helpless. I don't ever like feeling helpless. I don't like feeling weak. But the beauty of the Lord is, listen, if you can be okay there, I will carry you. And if you want to know my power in that way, surrender to being small. Surrender to being frail. Surrender to being ignoble. To not being recognized. To not being popular. To not being cool. By the way, there are no cool Christians, right? They just all look like us. right? There's no, see, sometimes a pastor, he wants to be a cool pastor. You just look like a nerd now, right? You're not a cool pastor. You're an old pastor trying to be cool, and we all know it, right? Kind of thing. Do something normal with your hair and get over it. But nonetheless, kind of thing, right? The beauty of coming to the realization of what Jesus accepts is that it allows us to be accepted. The greatest hindrance in our relationship with Jesus is not disciples. The greatest hindrance in our relationship with Jesus is not even unbelievers. The greatest hindrance in our relationship with Jesus is us. Our flesh, who wants to feel special, who wants to feel like it earned something, who wants to look noble and esteemed and valued in the eyes of the world. And so no, the kingdom is fit for those who will come as little children. The beauty of it is when you realize that you're already accepted. You were accepted the moment you were a little child. You've already been accepted. The moment you just kind of drop your guard and let go, the moment that the freedom of the relationship can begin. Because you're not trying to earn something that's already been given to you. You're not trying to be something you'll never be, that he's never desired you to be. Now you can just be with Jesus. You can just be with Jesus.
We learn that there will always be obstacles that seem to stand between people and Jesus. Sometimes those obstacles even come from well-intentioned people who misunderstand his heart. But the greatest hindrance to coming to Christ is not ultimately other people, it's often ourselves. Our desire to feel important, to earn our place, or to be seen as worthy in the eyes of the world. Jesus welcomes those who come to him with humble, open hands. And this passage reminds us not only to make room for others to come to him, but to examine anything in ourselves that may be keeping us from coming to him. All right, that's all for now. I hope you can tune in next time. Thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.